want to trust you on something, Luke Smith. I want to trust you on something. To set up a trust.
Trust away.
Yeah. How are you today?
I'm good.
We're going to talk about family trust.
Yep.
Are they popular? One.
Yes.
Are they common? Two.
For those that know, yes.
Like you always say, you don't know what you don't know.
I know what you don't know. So look, really, really good way of structuring assets and taking advantage of, I guess, again, in that theme we've got of flexibility and choice.
Yeah.
Trusts are a really good way of owning assets and being able to then decide what and how happens with them down the road.
Okay, is it all money? It's just involving money?
Not necessarily. A trust can be used to hold an asset. So it could be a building, it could be shares, it could be cash, it could be anything.
Anything.
You can put anything in a trust.
Yeah.
The important thing about a trust is knowing why you're using it, because obviously you need a specific purpose, because there are benefits and considerations like anything. So knowing why you're going to use one is important, and also being prepared. It's very important that you don't go and buy something and then say, oh, now I'll put that in a trust, because there could be potential capital gains tax issues, there could be ownership issues, there's control issues. So we're going to talk through some of the key things about family trust today, and I guess what people should look out for, and some of the big take-homes that, you know, I think they are utilised somewhat. I know they're a big one for, you know, good accountants, and they're a very good planning tool. But obviously they're not for everybody, because you need to have a certain amount of asset or a certain amount of need to actually make the most of it.
Yeah. So you really got to think about what it is for a start. What is a family trust?
Well, a family trust is just a separate entity that can hold an asset. So it's a separate legal entity,
right,
that is controlled either by a trustee or a company where you are a director of that company. So you have a controlling entity, and the trust just holds the asset for the use and the benefit of the beneficiaries of that trust. So you have control at the top, you have ownership in the middle, i.e. the ABC trust owns a property, and then the beneficiaries of that trust obviously can then receive things from the trust in relation to capital, income of distribution, things like that.
Okay, but if you do you entrust money?
You can put money in there, you can use
That's
money to then buy an asset.
Yeah, is that the most common? Like you bequeath somebody?
Oh, yeah, in a way. Like, let's say I had $500,000 lying around, and I was already working and earning, you know, a decent wage. I may not want to receive all of the rent from a building. So if I'm going to buy a building, I could buy the building in the trust, and then let's say I had 2 or 3 kids and my wife didn't work. You have then the discretion, as the name states, a discretionary family trust, to pass income to the most tax advantageous beneficiaries of that entity. So here's an example. You and I are in the trust.
Right.
We're both earning $200,000 a year, and we don't want any other taxable income in our name. However, your wife and my wife, or my child and your child, they might be at university, they might be 19, working at McDonald's on the weekend, and we could pass an amount of money to them and use their marginal tax rate rather than our own. So, discretionary family trust. You have the discretion to pass income and capital to the people that you wish to give it to, which could then, as an ancillary benefit, be advantageous from a tax planning perspective.
And I could do that now.
You've been able to do this for years. This is, I'm not putting a flag anywhere near here.
But I suppose, look, when you think about a trust, you think about an estate, don't you? It's
in a way,
handing down something.
Exactly right. And look, there are various, you know, there's a discretionary family trust. There's also another version that's called a unit trust, where you have specific units in that trust where you can have individual ownership. There's testamentary family trust, or testamentary trust that comes to life through a will. So good estate planning lawyers use those to try and protect assets for young children, and there are tax benefits of that. So the trust is a very broad term. A self-managed super form is actually a form of trust. So today we're really sort of focusing on a discretionary family trust, because as the name says, you have the discretion to pass income to nominated beneficiaries, which from a tax planning perspective, or from a capital gains tax planning perspective, let's say you bought a building, bought the building for 500, sold it for $1 million. Okay, you're going to have capital gains tax to pay. You may not want to receive all of that capital gain yourself. Now, if you own the building in your own name, it's completely accessible to you. If you own something through a trust and you had 3 kids and a wife, you then have 4 different portals to be able to look to try and pass income and capital out of as part of your overall planning strategy. So used very well where there's accumulated assets outside of superannuation, and they're becoming more and more prevalent with the limits that are being put on super, as we've discussed in previous weeks. You can only get so much in there and make it tax-free. So trusts are becoming far more prevalent for non-superannuation based asset accumulation.
What happens in a family breakdown or separation and divorce happens, and you've already established a family trust?
Well, the assets are owned by the trust. It would then be a case of working with a family lawyer to ascertain who's going to get what, who's going to get past what, and who's going to remain either inside or outside of that entity. So the thing with these things is you must get advice. Okay, you need to get advice before you use it so that you get it set up correctly. You need to get advice while you're using it because you need a good accountant who's on the ball to try and administer and manage it for you. And then if something like that does happen, either winding up or a separation or something like that, there are specific things that you need to get advice from. So having a good family lawyer is going to be very, very beneficial for you as part of your broader strategy.
Hypothetical, Luke Smith, I've established the trust, I all of a sudden get a bonus in wage, and I've got a certain amount that I'm drip filtering to who's getting some of that money or whatever.
Yeah.
Can I increase that amount?
You can pass any amount of money or capital out to any beneficiary of the trust. It's then about working with your relevant professional, be it your accountant or your lawyer or your financial planner, to say, well, what's the most advantageous way to make the most of what's being earned, what's being distributed, or what's been sold. So you have the discretion, as the name says, to pass that at any ratio at any point, to make sure you make the most of your investment opportunities.
And terminate it if I want to?
And you can also wind it up. Yeah. Exactly right. So it's not something that goes on forever. You really need to read the deed, and the deed is the if you like the rule book for the trust. It says what you can and can't do, and some deeds have a lifespan and some don't. So it's important to understand the duration of what you're working with, and again bringing it back to your need and why.
Any reason why I wouldn't be able to establish a trust?
No, there's no reason why you wouldn't, but I guess it would come back to more why you would. Okay, anybody can go and open a trust, like you and I could go out this afternoon and buy a Ferrari. Doesn't mean it's necessarily the best thing, because I probably won't fit in to start with. So it's about understanding why and saying, well, yes, I can. You probably wouldn't open a trust if you didn't have a significant amount of asset that you then needed to try and take advantage of multiple marginal tax rates, either spouses, partners, or children. Because if you're going to end up with the money yourself, there's not a great deal of benefit. But a wonderful structure to be able to control the distribution of income, the distribution of capital, and also from an asset protection perspective, there's a separate entity that owns something that you could then either bring people into or take people out of, and you're not changing the ownership of an asset.
How young or old can a beneficiary be? Any age?
Oh, any age.
Right. So,
any age.
So
anybody
all of a
can be a
sudden
beneficiary.
you've just been married. A year later, you have a child.
Yeah.
You could establish a trust for that child.
You can. Yeah. That's right. Exactly. So you could have an individual. You could put some assets away that you wanted to pass. In the unlikely event of your death, or you could put some. If you inherited a large sum of money and you didn't want to pay income tax on it in your name, you could potentially look to use a family trust to then fund the kids' school fees, to fund, dependent children these days, which, as I understand, dependent blows right up to sort of 30, 35 these days. Gone are the days of them ceasing being financially dependent on 18.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
it. Why would anyone want to have a trust like that, though? Why would you set one up?
Well, I think you'd do that for control.
Right.
So a trust is a very good way of maintaining asset protection, having choice in relation to where income is passed out, and flexibility. As I say, I'd rather always give a client the ability to choose rather than force them down one road. So if the asset's owned personally, it's all coming to me. If an asset's owned in a trust, I could then use my girls, my wife, and anyone else you wanted to nominate as somewhere to receive money. Now, obviously, that's where the tax planning side of things really come in, because you need an accountant who's on the ball and he's sharp and has used these before to make sure you're maximising those opportunities. And there's obviously legislative requirements that need to be met along the way. And one of the biggest things is obviously for investment and for the ownership. You find a lot with buildings. Buildings and capital. So let's say someone's died and you inherited $600,000 or $700,000, or if you were that way inclined, you could have $666,000 in a family trust. if that number excited you, and then you could use that to fund school fees and
Okay.
not have everything coming to one individual.
Yeah.
So very good where you have a discrepancy in income.
How do you entrust to you goods and chattels in regard to artwork or jewellery? Does that work in a trust? Or?
So you can. You need to make sure that you have, when you acquire things, the ownership structure correct.
Right.
Okay, because you don't want to buy something and then move it in, because depending on the asset you're talking about, you could have stamp duty. So you wouldn't want to go and buy a house in your own name and then go, oh, I'll just transfer it into my trust. There's the potential for unnecessary stamp duty. So that's why I say you need to know why you're going to use one, and then make sure that you have it set up and then the assets are acquired in the correct name.
Yeah.
You see that a lot where people will come in and say, oh, well, I'm going to do this. Great, we can talk about doing that. They'll come in on Monday and go, oh, I bought a house, I put a deposit down, I've done A, B and C, and the entity doesn't exist. So you don't want to make things any more complicated than you need to.
So
get some advice.
Luke Smith, in 2 words, security and
flexibility.
And flexibility, yeah.
Yep, exactly.
And also embedded in there a good tax way.
Yeah, and that's just a
Minimise
byproduct of the flexibility. That's exactly right. Obviously, for our friends in the ATO, we don't do things just for tax purposes. However, if there's an ancillary benefit, then that's all well and good. But really, it's about asset protection and the discretion to be able to pass income where you wish it to go.
What's the takeaway from this bit?
Oh, look, I think the biggest thing is understand why you're going to do it. Use it to protect your assets. If you want to have control over your overall tax position, it's a very flexible structure. It's very good for capital gains. And it's very good where if you wanted to bring some people together to do an investment opportunity, you could have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 different people collectively invest in a structure where the ownership is controlled, and then you can allocate, depending on the nature of the trust, either units in the trust or collectively distributed around to the members of that trust. So it's very good. Be prepared, get your paperwork right, protect your assets, and have discretion, have control.
It's a good word, isn't it? Trust.
Trust.
And Luke Smith from Envision Financial. You can call him on 62604749, envisionfinancial.com.au, or if you've got some financial advice you'd like now, you can do it now, 6255 1206. Envision Financial's got a great thing happening in a couple of weeks too. We'll get around that too. If you need financial advice, it's the time to do it too. Luke Smith on 6255 1206. Just before we jump into a couple of other things, when I was in my previous life 200 years ago, I worked for a particular company and the word trust used to come up. But Luke Smith, it was perceived that the trust that you were setting up was after you died, and you were giving money like a drip filtering to your kids because you wanted to help their future. That's different to what we're talking about.
Correct.
Now.
That's a testamentary trust that comes to life via your will, and a good estate planning lawyer will word that up correctly so that in the event that you were to predecease somebody and you wanted to give some assets or specific assets to your children, that structure comes to life on your passing and holds assets for minors.
Yeah. But this one's a family trust.
Yeah, this is a discretionary family trust. So
what do you need?
So first and foremost, we need a trustee. So you need to decide who's going to control it. Okay, so you and I, joint, an individual, or a company where you are a director or have multiple directors of the company. So you need to think about who's going to be involved, and you need to think about the flexibilities of that, because like most things, there are pros and cons of both options. So you need to be aware of that. You need a deed. Okay, and the
piece
deed,
of paper with instructions.
You basically, it's a book that has the rules of the trust. What you can do, what you can't do, life explorations.
Do they change, or is the...
Yeah, they can. So one of the big things people need to be mindful of is read the deed. Read the deed, read the deed,
Who's
read
written
the
deed?
Lawyer write the deed.
A lawyer.
Yes, he goes.
So he has parameters. This is the rule book.
That's right.
This is what you got to do.
And you can make specific amendments to that depending on what your needs are.
Right.
So you need someone to control it, either yourself or a company that you're a director of.
What would you advise there?
Look, I think from a flexibility standpoint, a corporate trustee or a company is good, because if you have a change in circumstance, you can change the trustee or the directors of the trustee a lot easier than appointing people. If you have a sole trustee, like I'm the trustee and I die, it's very difficult to then try to make changes. So if you have a corporate at the top, you can put people in or take people out as directors, It's a lot easier to administer, especially from a paperwork standpoint as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you've got to understand who's involved and what you're trying to achieve both now and in the future.
Is it better to have a neutral corner?
Oh, not necessarily.
Hang on a
I think you need to be able to, again, understand the control. You need to make sure your paperwork's right. So you need a TFN. You may need an ABN depending on what you're doing. So this is where it's important to get good tax advice. Okay?
Why do you need an ABN?
Because you could be using that to operate a business. If you're operating a business, there are certain parameters you do need or don't need an ABN. So get good tax advice. You need a TFN from the ATO.
You'd have that anyway, wouldn't you?
Well, it gets its own.
Oh, a separate one for
So
your trust.
this entity is a separate legal entity.
So you can't
has
just use
its
your
own
own
identity.
your
Not
own
at all.
TFN.
No, not at all. You need the settlor. So the settlor is the person that creates the trust, and then the big one. This is where all the bells and whistles are. The appointor. Okay, the appointor appoints the trustee. So the appointor ultimately has the most control because they can say who does or doesn't control the trust. So, for example, husband and wife are trustees, but the husband's the appointor. He has the right to remove his missus.
Who dictates who the appointor is?
Well, that's decided and created at the time it's set up.
Okay.
So you need good advice in relation to setting it up so that you actually understand the roles and responsibilities and the power of that. Because just because my wife and I are the trustees, if I'm the appointor, I have ultimate control. So
Ooh,
get good
whether
legal
that'll go well
advice.
in the kitchen, Luke, I tell you.
Yes, I just bow down to my wife and say, yes, darling, whatever you want.
Whatever, yeah.
So they're the big ticket items, and have that in place before you go acquiring assets. Okay, so be prepared.
To whom do you have to answer? The appointor?
Well, I guess in most situations you find where there's, say, a husband and wife,
Okay.
and they're acquiring assets or holding assets that they've accumulated, and the children and themselves may be beneficiaries. So I guess be prepared. Make sure you've got your paperwork, it's watertight. Make sure you've got your TFN and your ABN. Make sure your deed allows you to do what you want to do. One thing we do find is you need to check these things because they do change and legislation changes. And if your deed doesn't allow you to do what the law says you can do, then you can't do it.
Wouldn't it be easy to abdicate all of that responsibility, give it over to a lawyer or an accountant?
Well,
or
that's
somebody?
where you need a
That's the
team of
best way
people.
to do it,
This
isn't
is
it?
where you need a team. So, we only do so much. Lawyers only do so much. Accountants only do so much. So it's about having a good team around you to cover off all of those different components so that you don't go and do something unknowingly and miss out on some of those flexibilities.
Two other words, get advice.
Get advice.
Yeah, and look after your paperwork. And make sure you settle it before you actually sign. And once you've signed, is that the end of it?
No, look, then you've got, that's where the accountant steps in to make sure that your compliance and your paperwork is done correctly, lodging tax returns. So the ATO wants to know what's going on. So this is where you need a good team of people around you. Somebody like me can invest the money that's in there, but I don't do the tax return. So then I refer that out to, your accountants and that. And then obviously from like you said earlier, if there's a dispute or a separation, then you get your family lawyers involved to try
And
and
Luke
help
Smith,
cut
you
that
were
up.
telling me that at the start of our conversation this afternoon with Envision Financial, that this is under the radar. This trust system
I
is
think
not
these are pretty common for people that build significant asset bases. But I think we are finding more and more this is becoming a very good structure outside of superannuation because the government have put caps on how much we can have in there from a tax-free perspective. A lot of people are looking to try and then accumulate assets outside of super because they can't get any more in. So these go hand in hand with your super as part of your broader planning strategy to make sure that you've got control as you get closer to retirement.
So think about a family trust. Acronym for today. Oh, you can do this one.
CGT.
Yeah, capital gains bloody
Capital
tax.
gains tax, Blake. No, but you know what? A lot of people say, oh, I've got to pay it. If I gave you a choice between paying tax and making money and not making money,
Yes, I know.
I'd rather make some money. So I guess this ties in really well with this structure because if you own an asset in your own name, the CGT is all yours. If you own an asset in a trust, it could be yours, your wives, and some of your kids too. So tax planning and flexibility ties in with both income and capital gains. So
And it ties in with those other two words. Luke, get advice.
get advice.
Get advice.
Yep,
Okay,
exactly
where time's beating is, you've got 6 weeks of education material resources.
We do, that's
to
right.
help us
Yep.
This is coming up for pennies.
is.
For pennies, you'll
It
know
is.
all about
So
your financial.
yeah, look, we've got a couple of spots left. We're going to look to kick this off at the end of mid to the end of September. We're just taking numbers and registrations at the moment, and then we're going to work out what suits everybody, and then lock that in for 6 weeks, and people can come in and talk about this, super,
Great
insurance,
point, yeah.
structures, deductions. We've had a number of people off the back of the show in recently, and have sort of left like a bit of a deer in the headlights and said, "Oh wow, I didn't realise that that was available to me," and we've seen some really significant savings, which is good, because I like it when people leave and go, "You know what? If I hadn't done this, I wouldn't have saved 15 or 20 grand over the next 5 years."
You know, for a few $100s, you're going to get all the advice you need in your seminar.
It could cost you a lot more to not find out.
Yeah.
The upside is you won't know you missed out until someone tells you in retirement. Then you'd be really
and
upset.
you know what you say once the seminars are gone? Geez, I wish I'd gone there.
Yeah, kills me
You've
every
got to do
week.
it. It's coming up soon. For pennies, you'll be able to save thousands. envisionfinancial.com.au/events. If you need to get in touch with Luke Smith, you can give him a call, 6260-4749. They're at 4452 Townsend Street in Phillip. Don't miss out on those. Thank you, Luke. Catch you in a week.
See you in a week.